talked a lot on the show about the impact contact sports like football can have on the brain, even from minor hits to the head. And like any injury risk, it's safe to assume your chances of getting hurt increase the longer you play. But a new report finds even a small amount of time on the field can make a big difference. Researchers at Boston University's CTE Center looked at more than 250 brains donated by former amateur and professional football players and found that the risk of developing the degenerative brain disease known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy rose by 30% every single year of play. It's statistics like that which are leading to a push for a statewide ban on tackle football for children in grades 7 and under, with a fine for any school or youth football league found in violation. The bill is called the No Hits Act. Joined now by two of the proponents. Chris Nowinski is former defensive tackle for Harvard and a pro wrestler, now co-founder, executive director of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Chris, it's great to see you as always. Dr. Robert Stern is the study's co-author and director of clinical research at BU's CTE Center. Doctor, it's good to see you. And by the way, we reached out to a large number of the bill's opponents, but each told us they were unable to join us. So for starters, did I leave out anything major when I was describing what your goal is with this legislation?
No, the goal is to protect kids and so they don't get chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Is anybody else doing it? Any other jurisdictions, states, city, community? Anybody else doing this?
Yes, there's a hearing on Tuesday in New York. California is going to be filing. It's, yes.
So it seems to me the critical part as a non-scientist, in fact someone who's horrible in science, is that sub-concussive hits. We're also focused on concussions because of the great work you guys and your colleagues have done. But you talk about sub-concussive hits. Fill in the blanks for me, Doctor.
Oh, you know, everyone's talking about concussions. And concussions mean when you get hit and you have symptoms. And without the symptoms, we don't know if it's a big enough hit. Is it doing anything? Well, what we know from science now is that a lot of those repetitive hits without any symptoms can actually lead to both short-term and long-term neurological problems.
And give me the magnitude of this again from your, I didn't go into a lot of the details here, the magnitude, the impact. The multiple effect of the starting at a young age.
Yeah, so you know what we found is twofold. One is some of our research has shown that if you start playing tackle football before age 12, it increases your risk for later life problems tremendously. The new study was looking at deceased individuals' brains, and it showed that for every year played, it increased the risk for later life brain disease tremendously.
When you say, well, actually, let me get to the argument. Even though they didn't show up, some of them were kind enough to at least email some of their arguments. One of the arguments I hear a lot, Chris, is it infringes on parental decision-making. What do you say to that?
This is one of those areas where maybe parents shouldn't have the choice because you got to look at it from the kid's perspective. We're giving children a brain disease. The kid has no voice in that because they can't understand the risk they're getting exposed to. So you can't like put lead in your kid's water. You can't let them drive a car at 10 years old. You can't do those things.
When you have a conversation face to face with a parent who's on the other side of this issue, and you give them the conclusions reached by Dr. Stern and his colleagues, what do they say to you when they're looking in your eyes?
They try to, so one of the problems here is that there's been a decade-long misinformation campaign about CTE, right? We've been here talking about that. The NFL was trying to say this wasn't an issue for a long time. A lot of those ideas have stuck in their head. There's not enough proof. The sample is biased, although they could never explain what that means. So there's a lot of people trying to deal with complex science that may not understand it. And so, unfortunately, we're trying to get them caught up on something that we do every day, but they are just seeing every once in a while.
Speaking of, if I may, just for a second, some of the sample bias was voiced. This guy, Paul Dederis, among the people we invited, at least was kind enough to send us an email. He's from the Mass Youth Football Alliance. Let me list a couple of things that he says. The average age in the study is 51. The game has changed a lot. In the intervening years since they were playing youth football. Isn't there legitimacy to that argument?
Not really.
Why not?
Because a lot of the things that have changed in the game have been done to protect against concussion, the big hits, the symptomatic hits, changes in some of the rules of the game. In recent years, there have been attempts to, teach kids how to tackle better. That might do something, and that's good, but it doesn't remove the brain from the game. And so every play, during practices, during games, the kids are hitting their heads over and over again against their opponents, against down to the ground, and all those hits are doing something to those developing brains. You asked before about what do we tell parents? I tell them two things. One is there's growing science, really important science that's every month another paper showing that even in the short term, you look at the number of hits that kids get over one season of play, and there's changes on MRI scans, there's changes on blood tests. But the other thing is just common sense. These kids' brains are going through the most incredible maturation during this short period of time before puberty. Does it make sense that we say, put them in this big plastic helmet and hit your head over and over and over again with that precious organ inside?
Well, there's one study actually that was sent to me by that same guy that doesn't agree with your conclusion. It's from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Let me read you the title. I know you've taken a look at it.
Yeah.
Study finds no link between youth contact sports and cognitive mental health problems. Chris Nowinski?
So people read that headline, Youth Contact Sports, and thought this was about kids. I've actually read the study, and first of all, it's a terrible study. But second of all, the average age is 16 in this study, and no child was younger than 7th grade. And all they did was ask, do you intend to play football one time, and then looked at them again 14 years later. So they're not even measuring exposure. They're not measuring how many years they played. So it's a terrible study, and it doesn't support them, and I'm sorry. It's not even about youth tackle football. It's about high school football.
Can I tell you, you're the last two guys who need advice from me, but can I give you a little bit of advice?
Would you?
Please.
You and I have talked a lot about probably the most admired football player on the planet, Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And while he's not so great on the concussion issue, we don't need to visit that again. You, I think, shared with me a few years ago something that knocked my socks off. It was an all-star team of some of the greatest football players who ever lived who had one important thing in common, including Tom Brady. What was it?
Never played tackle till high school. Top 5 players all time. Brady, Walter Payton, Jim Brown, Lawrence Taylor, Jerry Rice.
So why? I mean, I'm assuming as a parent, even though I have daughters and they weren't playing tackle football, that part of this is the desire. I want that kid of mine to be the next Tom Brady, to be the next whatever. Tom Brady became Tom Brady without playing at 12 and under. That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. I look at this like smoking and lung cancer.
Meaning what?
Well, so the correlation is actually very similar. Number of years you smoke is most likely. Number is most correlated with risk of getting lung cancer. So we knew that in 1954. In 1954, it was already proven the longer you smoke, the greater your risk of lung cancer. But we waited 50 years to set policies and educate people. And how many people died from lung cancer? My uncle died from lung cancer last week. He started smoking as a teenager because there was this debate going on about whether smoking is really bad for you. And at that time, there were doctors who told you smoking might be good for you. We now know hitting your kid in the head is bad for your kid. We have to explain that to parents. Stop hitting your kid in the head. And if we don't make this a law, we'll have to wait 30 years for parents to get caught up and change their behavior.
So you have 30 seconds. If a parent is watching who is in good faith, doesn't have a closed mind, but has concerns, what do you want to add to what Chris had to say, Doctor?
Oh, man. Think about common sense. We parents do everything possible to keep our kids safe and healthy and live to their greatest potential. Does it make sense to have them rattle their brain over and over and over again during the most incredible times of brain development and increase the risk for both short-term problems, so they don't succeed in school, and long-term problems, including this brain disease that's similar to Alzheimer's disease?
What are the prospects of this thing? I know it's bipartisan sport, which is a good start. What are the prospects of this?
I think it's got a shot because the science is now so strong, and there's so many football players who support this. The interesting thing is college and pro football players support this because we're the ones that are getting the disease because we played too long. And when you put your kid in tackle football at 5, you don't know how long they're going to play. If you make them love the game and you make them good, they're going to play too long.
What's your website?
ConcussionFoundation.org. But go to tacklecanwait.com to see the new video and PSA of kids smoking cigarettes while they're playing football.
Tacklecanwait.com. Doctor, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much, Chris.
Jim,
Good
pleasure.
luck with your
Thank
work.
you.
Thanks so much.